Hello, class. Today we're going to read Chapter 6 of our Early Presidents Unit, The Many-Sided Jefferson. Keep in mind the big question, what important changes did Thomas Jefferson make to his country during his presidency? Fighting and name-calling. When Adams ran for re-election to the presidency, he lost. Unfortunately, the election of 1800 was filled with fighting and name-calling between the two parties. The new president was none other than the leader of the Democratic Republicans, Thomas Jefferson. Soon after Thomas Jefferson became president, all of the following lived in the White House: an architect, a lawyer, a scholar, an inventor, an author, a scientific farmer, and politician. Can you guess how many people lived in the White House? The answer is 1. Thomas Jefferson, you see. Jefferson was all those things. Like his countryman, Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson was the man of endless curiosity. He was a philosopher. He owned more than 6,500 books on almost every subject imaginable. His book collection became the start of the collection for the Library of Congress. Like Franklin, Jefferson applied a scientific approach to everything. All his life, he recorded his observations of the weather, the stars, and the world of nature around him. On his plantation, he continually experimented to discover which plants and trees from around the world would grow well in Virginia. He even wrote a book about estate animal and plant life and its geography. While still in his early 20s, Jefferson designed supervised the construction of his home and everything in it, right down to the furniture and curtains. The house sits on a mountaintop in central Virginia, so Jefferson called it Monticello. The word is Italian for little mountain. Over the years, he invented many gadgets for Monticello that still delight the thousands who visit there each year. Later, Jefferson designed the campus and first buildings of the University of Virginia. Jefferson believed that the pursuit of happiness was only possible when the rights and freedoms of ordinary people were protected. According to Jefferson, it was only possible when they governed themselves. Jefferson's faith in ordinary people, though, came with one very big condition: the people must be educated. He believed an ignorant and uneducated people would never remain free for long. Years before Jefferson became president, he tried to get his state of Virginia to provide free education. But this idea was too advanced for people at that time. Jefferson's attempt was unsuccessful. But, of course, at the time, only free, white, property-owning males were in a position to benefit from Jefferson's belief. Sadly, Jefferson, who failed to persuade his state to accept another of his ideas, Jefferson viewed slavery as evil. He tried to get Virginia to pass a law that children born to enslaved people would be automatically free at birth. Jefferson also drafted the 1784 Land Ordinance that would have banned slavery in all western states. It lost in Congress by only one vote. It was not to be. In 1807, the government did agree on a bill to end the slave trade. Jefferson signed this bill into law. Yet Jefferson himself owned many enslaved people, as nearly every well-to-do Southern family did. Jefferson had an interesting exchange of letters on the subject of slavery with Benjamin Banneker, a free African-American who helped to build the federal city. Banneker reminded Jefferson of his own words in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and that one of their unalienable rights is liberty. Why then, Banneker asked, was slavery allowed to continue? And how could Jefferson himself continue to hold enslaved people? In his reply, Jefferson agreed that slavery was wrong. He said that Banneker himself was proof that African Americans could achieve much, if given their freedom, but he had no good answers to Banneker's questions. He especially had no good answers about his own enslaved people. Like many landowners of the time, Jefferson continued to practice the practice of slavery, putting off the fight that would happen years later. Mr. President. This is the man who prepared to take office of the President of the United States on March 4, 1801. That morning, Jefferson rose early as usual. wrote letters, and read in his room at Washington, D.C. boarding house. He had breakfast with the other guests, as he had done for many days before. He was dressed in a plain suit, like those worn by plain citizens. Shortly before noon, Thomas Jefferson stepped out of the boarding house, where he was met by a small group of officials. Together, they walked briskly through the muddy streets to the Capitol, where Jefferson would take the oath of office. No elegant uniform, no special badges, no ceremonial sword at his side, no elegant horse-drawn coach to carry him, no big parade. That was Thomas Jefferson. That was Jefferson's White House, too. All the visitors were treated the same. The British ambassador was offended that the President of the United States greeted him in slippers. At dinner, there was no special seating plan for guests. The first people to the table, whoever they might be, could sit next to the President if they wished. When Jefferson had to go anywhere outside the President's house, he rode on horseback, by himself. There was no splendid presidential coach and no guards. President Jefferson did these things because he wanted to make a point. In a republic, all are equal. No one should have special privileges above anyone else. The Louisiana Purchase. President Jefferson and the members of his Democratic Republican Party in Congress quickly changed many of the laws the Federalists had made. They got rid of the hated whiskey tax. They cut government spending. For example, they reduced the size of the Army and the Navy. Jefferson had planned to make changes when he became president, so no one was surprised by them. His greatest achievement, however, was one he hadn't planned on at all. In fact, it came about through an incredible stroke of luck. Because he acted quickly, when this situation arose, President Jefferson was able to double the size of the United States. Back in the 1700s, France had claimed all the land between the Mississippi River and Rocky Mountains. France called this area Louisiana, after King Louis of France. After one of its wars with Great Britain, France gave Louisiana to Spain. To American farmers who lived in the West, the most important part of Louisiana was the port city of New Orleans, near the mouth of the Mississippi River. When you look at a map, you can see why. If you were a Western farmer growing corn or wheat, how would you send your crops to market on the eastern cities or in Europe? Not by wagon, that would be far too expensive. You would just put them on rafts and float them down the rivers. All the rivers in that part of the country eventually flow into the Mississippi River. So New Orleans would be at the end of the line for your crops. There you would sell them to a merchant who would then put them on ships bound for the eastern cities, or Europe, or perhaps the West Indies. That would happen, though, if the country that owned New Orleans stopped What would happen, though, if the country that owned New Orleans stopped allowing Americans to use it? American farmers would not be able to get their crops to market. They would go broke. In 1802, it looked like that might happen. Spain suddenly announced that Western farmers could no longer use New Orleans. Even worse, President Jefferson learned that Spain had secretly given back all of Louisiana, including New Orleans, to France. Jefferson knew that the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to build a new empire in the Americas. This was serious trouble. Jefferson sent 2 representatives to France and instructed them to offer $10 million for New Orleans. Here is where luck entered the picture. You remember how France and Great Britain were always going to war against each other? Well, they were about to do that again. France needed money. Also, Napoleon had given up his idea of the new French Empire in North America. When the American representatives offered France $10 million for New Orleans, they were amazed by France's reply. "No," said the French, "we are not interested in selling New Orleans by itself. But if you'd like to buy all of the Louisiana territory, including New Orleans, for $15 million, we can make a deal." The Americans quickly accepted. The Louisiana Purchase, as it was called, doubled America's territory at a cost of a few pennies an acre. It was the biggest bargain in American history. Neither Jefferson nor anyone else knew exactly what he had bought, No one could know that until explorers went to see for themselves. They soon did, but that is a story for another time.